The next scenario after Nocturne is note for note. We move from the dreamlands into the glamorous art and music of Milan. Unfortunately, Milan is a shell of itself. A miasma of grief lingers in the chest of Milan's citizens, and it is up to your investigators to find out exactly what ails the global fashion capital. The scenario, note for note, provides insights to the dark cults that follow our investigators, as well as gives the investigators another piece of the simulacrum. The investigators will explore the disappearance of the opera star that they may be familiar with. They will confront death after death, piecing together strange murders throughout Milan, and they will deal with art and the world surrounding it, macabre and all. So keepers, grab your drama masks, purchase your opera tickets, and take a seat, because we are discussing Orient Express's next scenario, note for note. Before I jump into the scenario itself, I need to preface this. I highly recommend to introduce Caterina Cavallaro prior to note for note. She is the central NPC that is adopted in this scenario by the primary antagonist and is a strong human motivator for the investigators. She is technically, and keyword technically, introduced at the end of Les Fleurs d'un Mal, aka part 2 of my episodes, or I believe the second scenario in the Horror on Orient Express. She is very friendly to the investigators in Les Fleurs d'un Mal when they get on to the Orient Express. She performs the Ida on the train ride, and through Cavallo's friendship, gives the investigators front row tickets for opening night in gratitude for their company. If you forget to introduce her or choose not to, you could easily insert her in this event at the end of any downtime event prior to note for note. Now, if you forget entirely, you can have the investigators uncover the mystery without any prior knowledge of Cavallaro. Hannah 1, without the immediate connection, can work on its own, but you need to be considered that you may need to give them more info. Okay, Caterina Cavallaro, an opera star, will assumedly arrive earlier than the investigators in Milan. When she does, the opera singer is abducted by Milan's chapter of the Brothers of the Skin. She was abducted by Flavio Conti, who needed the help from Arturo Faccia since he was dying due to some sort of disease. Faccia is the leader of this chapter and draws his collection of brothers from the business and political world in order to do this. He owns the factories in Milan and uses it as a vehicle to look for the simulacrum. The torso simulacrum is a means of immortality since he has been sustaining his life through organ transplants and other arcane and villainous powers. In the meantime, he and the other brothers replace their organs with victims throughout Milan. Many of the brothers in this chapter are wealthy and or in business/political sectors of. So, for your game, I recommend keeping note of this since investigators might ask how or why Faccia or someone around that group hangs around a certain crowd of people. They might ask, why are there so many business people in this area? It's worth making note of that so that you can hint at the potential of the Brothers of Skin being in this city. Nevertheless, Faccia sent his org recipient, Flavio Conti, to the station to abduct Cavallaro. There, Faccia, when he has Cavallaro and Flavio in this factory room, casts the spell Control Skin to make her unrecognizable. Afterwards, the leader casts Transfer Organ to exchange their lungs and vocal cords so that Faccia can sing the Ida on the opening night that Cavallaro is supposed to. The ultimate goal is to find and obtain the torso piece of the simulacrum. And just a side note, the book doesn't make it clear why Faccia does any of this. I assume it's to locate the torso piece of the simulacrum and to gain immortality without the need of transplanting organs. I recommend writing up some cover or concrete reason because the players may ask, who knows? Regardless, Faccia is well protected and regarded as a businessman, so it's up to the investigators to not only find the simulacrum, but deal with Faccia's bodyguards, fellow cultists, and Caterina's quote-unquote disappearance. It's important to emphasize the atmosphere of Milan. Unlike the other scenarios, I feel like Milan is all about its vibes, about its aura, about its emotions. I think the second paragraph on Shell of the City subsection states this perfectly. The initial impression of emotional emptiness increases. The investigators feel more and more of that in Milan, that it is a hollow city, and that while the brick and mortar is sound, the flesh and blood is not. Milan has neither brashness nor vivacity. In the pale winter light, Milan is a gray city growing dimmer. The architecture and streets are impressive and imposing, but the inhabitants are unable to match such grandeur. Immaculately dressed, they start lightning fast conversations, then languish into embarrassed silence after superficial topics. Milan should look grandiose then, but feel empty and sad. I recommend indicating that wherever they go throughout their investigation in Milan, whether they stop at the hotel, the station, Cavallo's apartment, La Scala, or the factories, make sure that the atmosphere is empty, emotionless, and still. Of course, the cause of the atmosphere is because of the torso piece. The torso piece is being used in the Piazza del Scala. The investigators essentially need to procure the torso from the grips of production and Faccia's grubby hands. How they go about doing that is up to your investigators. Let the investigators explore Milan. The investigators can then begin to explore using the threads of a missing Cavallaro. This could lead them to Cavallaro's apartment, or it could mean discussing the scenario with the police, where they get Handout 2. Handout 2, aka interacting with police, will set them up for success. Try to have them get Handout 2. I think it's really helpful and paints them in the right direction. They could also explore the hotel rooms that Cavallaro bought them in, which is another prime investigation location. These rooms can even hold drawings and illustrated photographs that indicate the simulacrum is in Milan. One of them pertains to a costume design that hints at the staff car simulacrum even. I personally give them a small chance to notice how this set piece, such artwork, looks mystical, strange. I recommend maybe giving the chance to roll occult, or, if you're feeling dangerous, Cthulhu Mythos. They could look at the cathedral as an investigation point. Father Angelico's situation and the three cronies can be creepy and foreshadow the torso piece as well. However, I want to give some advice on that. I think the in cathedral section can be removed entirely. In fact, I think it's the weakest part to the entire scenario. It doesn't add much aside from an artificial fear / scare from the three cronies and the awkward crying that happens from Father Angelico due to the baleful influence. So I recommend just not including it at all unless you want that extra scare or you have a really cool or clever idea. Eventually, your investigators should learn about the death of Ennio Spinola. The point of investigating the murder scene in Portello / the factory should reveal one important thing. There were two bodies side by side in this factory. They can also learn who owns the company, that being Flavio Conti, aka the one who received the transplant. Flavio Conti's transplant might have been helpful for his physical health, but not his mental well-being. And if the investigators decide to check out Flavio Conti and what happened to him and why he's been out of work, then they're in for a dangerous time. The surgery, while successful, destroyed the businessman's mental health. If pressed, he may draw his gun on the investigators. And I say, hint at this. Don't outright have him be immediately hostile. Build tension. This scenario, I think, relies on tension being built rather than you just throwing things at them. Don't worry. You'll be able to throw out all the horrors as we get further and further through the investigation and the Orient Express. Now, how the investigators approach this, it's up to them. They could sneak in to Conti's apartment. They could just break in. They could try to talk to him. They could try to call him. Whatever decision they make, respond accordingly. Now, if they don't go there, they could go to La Scala. La Scala is the highlight of the scenario. Before the show, it's an opportunity for investigators to learn what's going on in the theater. They can take the social approach, use their money, sneak in, or if they feel particularly dangerous, brute force their way in if they are dangerous. Once they are in, use the backstage as ways to disorient them. It's a cacophony of sadness, confusion, and loss as all of the crew are wrapped up in their pain of losing Cavallaro. Ask them to roll dodge checks, luck rolls, and navigate checks as they get further and further lost in this strange backroom-like setting. Whatever choice you make, hype up this labyrinth-like theater, because this is where the drama happens. Eventually, the investigators, if they do a thorough job, will put all of the, no pun intended, pieces together. Cavallaro was abducted and something terrible has happened to her. They can and will likely suspect Faccia. By the time they do, the investigators will have a show at the La Scala in the evening. And good news, as promised with Cavallaro, the group has front row seats. Here, they will see the aged Caterina Cavallaro alongside Faccia and a number of other elderly people who are part of the Brother of Skin. The book encapsulates the horror of this scene, and I would recommend reading this word for word if that is your style. As they are watching the show, as they are getting comfortable, they hear Faccia's voice. Not from the stage, neither from the person in front of them who's performing. No. As stated, from Faccia's old, dry mouth spilled the perfect notes of soprano in her prime, exactly as the investigators have heard them twice before. Let the investigators roll sanity rolls for understanding the horrid surgery. Let them revel in this awful truth. From there, the investigators and enemies will see the torso piece of the simulacrum come on stage as part of the performance. Now, it is up to them to go into the backstage, into the labyrinth of the backstage, and escape with the torso while contesting against the other brothers of the skin. To make this interesting, use the chase rules. Throw contraptions, props, and people as obstacles. For instance, the cultists throw down a huge elephant or figurine prop to stop the investigators. It could seriously hurt or hamper them, so they will need to respond accordingly. And failure can mean more than just getting lost or not being able to catch up to Faccia and his goons. For instance, after they get lost, Faccia obtains the torso and then sicks his goons on them in the labyrinth. Faccia can also easily hold the investigators hostage or try to convert them over to the brothers. He could manipulate them or even use Cavallaro as a bargaining chip. Obviously, Faccia will not follow through with his words, but that's up to the investigators to figure that out. You can also say Faccia just leaves Milan entirely. That will require them to track him down later in the horrors on the Orient Express. With all of that in mind, there should be some kind of final confrontation between Faccia and the investigators. If the investigators win and escape, then regardless if they defeat Faccia, this creature, this foul person, is doomed, as handout 5 indicates. It seems like Fenelek never leaves a job unfinished and was feeling a bit peckish, we'll say. And of course, when they escape, give them the usual investigative development phase and recovering and or losing sanity depending on their decisions. Now, what was the biggest change from my investigators and what I presented to y'all? Well, the biggest change was the inclusion of an NPC, or rather a group of NPCs. It was Biff Baxter and his manager, J.B. Bramwell. Baxter is labeled as an important American movie star who is big and fit, but not very smart. In fact, he's handsome as heck, but his acting skills are terrible, as you can see from his stats. He's literally the equivalent of being a himbo who's out of place but is just there. I included him to make sure the investigator had someone who was familiar with art. Obviously, Faye was familiar with art and artistry, but I wanted to make sure we had that extra connection just in case they struggled with roles or needed someone in the art world. I even made it so that when Biff was performing his play of Hamlet while they were there in Milan, I hinted at Faccia's cultist surgery. Also, Biff provided a great comedic relief since he is the honorary himbo and his manager is the exact opposite of that, with lovely skills like identify real talent. Seriously. Some of these skills, by the way, and just the extra NPCs is just wonderful to look at. I would highly recommend just taking some time to look at it. Seriously, it's funny as hell. In conclusion, I enjoyed Note for Note for what it is. I like this setting, albeit I think out of the first book on COC, it is definitely a little weaker. Fortunately, you and your investigators are going to have a blast when they travel to their next location, Venice. In Venice is where love and death persist in tandem. But that's for next time. And until then, check out all the resources, art, and tokens that I use for Note for Note, as well as the other stuff that I've mentioned in this video. Last but not least, special shout out to my Patreon supporters, Harrison Parker and Paul Volpe, for your continued support. Seriously, you help keep this channel running and I greatly appreciate it. You too can help support this channel financially by checking out my patreon.com, aka patreon.com/bloodydisposition, all with my simple naming conventions. You can also check out my Ko-fi, which is also going to be linked down below in the description box. And as always, keepers and investigators, I'm your average everyday queer host and keeper of arcane lore, Bloody Disposition, and hope you all have an awesome day. Ciao.